Good afternoon, tutors and fellow classmates. Before I start my presentation, I would like to ask a question. Do you know what happened in Little India during 2013? Okay, if you all don't know, it's actually rioting. Okay, so our group has decided to present on crisis management, and the case study they have chosen is Little India rioting. Okay, so first up, what is crisis? It's actually an unpredictable event that leads to unforeseeable consequences, which is of a potential risk. So in the case of Little India riot. Okay, so I'm Ignatius. I'm the first speaker. I'll be touching on the background of the riot and the factors that lead to the escalation of the riot. So the second speaker will be Songwen, who will present on the reasons why the riot came to a halt only 2 to 3 hours later. Okay, then Josh and Michelle will be the third and the fourth speaker respectively, touching on the measures implemented by the government. And lastly, Chen will conclude the whole presentation and also share with you all how can we manage crisis in the workplace. Okay, so firstly for background of riot. So it happens on 8 December 2013 along Race Course Road, as you can see from this road. And at 9:21 p.m., the fatal accident between the bus driver and the victim occurred, and this led to the outbreak of the riot. Next, there was an attack on the bus, the driver, and the timekeeper by about 100 rioters, which consists of Indian nationals. Next, the emergency vehicles arrived at the scene. Then at 9:45 p.m., the body was extradited by the SCDF officers, and subsequently, Ms. Wong, the timekeeper, and Mr. Lee, the bus driver, were rescued. So after the rescue, the rioters then turned their attention to emergency vehicles, whereby they set them on fire and overturned them. Then finally, riot ended at 11:25 p.m. And after the arrival of Special Operations Command. Okay, so moving along, there are two main factors and one sub-factors that leads to the escalation of a riot. The first main factor is misconception and misinterpretation of the situation. So in the case of the riot, the rioters heard that Ms. Wong was pushed down. Ms. Wong pushed down the victim of the bus, which were not true. And also some heard that the victim's body were violated by the police officers, which were also not true. So the general, most of them generally wondering why did the police protect Ms. Wong and Mr. Lee, because they thought they were the cause of the accident, which in fact they were not. And why did they protect them? Instead of arresting them? Hey, the next factor is quite important. It's actually the culture and psychology of the rioters, because the rioters consist mainly of foreign international. So they came from India. So the culture that they bring along is from India. And the first culture is the law of the underdog. So what this law states is that basically what common men on the street perceive. So in the case of the Little India riot, right, they perceived that the bus was at fault because they knocked down the victim. But instead, it was actually the victim that was drunk and ran into the blind spot of the bus. Okay, the next is street justice. So as you can see from this photo, this man is Oliver Queen. I'm sure you all know from the popular series called Arrow. So he's a vigilante which performs street justice by punishing wrongdoers. His favorite phrase is, "You have failed this city." So in the case of Little India riot, the rioters took law into their own hands and enforced street justice upon Ms. Wong and Mr. Lee, who they thought were the cause of the accident. So lastly, heroism. Okay, so some of them, of the Indian national, come from Tamil Nadu, which is a state in India. And one of the subculture there is that clashing with the police officers is an act of heroism. So what happened, as you can see in the riots, some of the riots turned their attention towards police cars and they set fire and overturned them. Okay. So the last sub-factor, why do I call it sub-factor, is because it's a contributing factor. They were under the influence of alcohol. Okay, so the first effect is aggression, which can be seen in their aggressive behavior when they were rioting. Next is alcohol myopia, which causes one to lose focus and attention when intoxicated. So if you are intoxicated, you might find it hard to see this letter, the yellow striking alcohol myopia word. And last but not least is overreaction. So studies have shown that in stressful conditions, an intoxicated person tend to overreact to perceived threat. In this case, it's faced from the police officer and the injustice because of their fallen colleague. So now I'd like to hand over my time to Songwen, who will present on the next part of the presentation.
Alright, thank you, Ignatius. I'll now be covering on the reason on why the riots only after 2 to 3 hours. Okay, firstly, this is the timeline for the events during the riot itself, and this is actually published in Straits Times. I would like to focus on these several events that actually contribute to the slow control of the riot. So from the events, timeline of the events, we can actually deduce that the request time was 23 minutes after the accident, approval time of 18 minutes after request, and 38 minutes of traveling time by the SOC in order to reach the SOC sites. So this is the approval protocol, where a commander on site will have the request, followed by the commanding officer of an NPC, and lastly the approval of the activation by the director of operation. So in between this process, the information are actually relayed through various operation rooms, and this actually leads to the time wastage. And it was observed that slow approval process actually slowed down the arrival of this SOC, and this actually emboldened the rioters. And moving on to the reason of why there's a 38 minutes of traveling time, at about 10:15, after they are activated, they are actually along the road of Bukit Timah Road, and they intend to make a U-turn and turn into a race course road where the riot is. However, division commander over here was unable to get any confirmation of the troop position at 10:17 from the operation room. So he told the operation room to tell the troop to actually enter via Hansfield Road so that they can approach the riots at the race course road from the rear. However, in order for them to reach this position, they have to make a U-turn back to the direction where they headed from and enter via the Kampong Java Road up down the road over here. So this actually took them about 15 minutes due to multiple traffic junctions and heavy traffic along the way. And this shows that there isn't any direct communication from the SOC between the SOC troop and the commander on ground itself. Secondly, I would like to move on to the decision made by the law enforcement. It could be seen that the police force is actually using the avoiding approach, where they try not to arrest the rioters so that they can reduce tension and also to buy time for the SOC arrival. And due to the police officer being outnumbered by the rioters, they were asked to hold their ground instead of arresting any of the rioters. And according to Mr. T, a former police commissioner, said that the decision to hold the ground rather than to try to engage or arrest the rioters shows lessons have not been learned from 3 riots in northern England in 2001, where studies showed that such a strategy actually emboldened the rioters itself. So lastly, I will move on to the communication problems that they faced during the riot itself. The radio of the police officer is actually being congested by overwhelming messages over the same frequency. So this actually hinders the ability for the police officer to make informed decision, to have a proper command control over the whole scene. And previously I mentioned that the arrival of SOC was late. It's also due to this communication breakdown, where they are unable to coordinate the troop and the police on site. And from this picture, you can actually see the deployment of the different forces for the riot. You can see that reinforcement actually arrive at different area, and due to the communication breakdown, they are unable to communicate and they are unaware of their position. So they are unable to actually form up into a critical force against the rioters, where it leads to a prolonged riot. So to conclude my part, the communication failure and the decision made by the commanders actually plays a part in the duration of the whole riot duration. Okay. Now I'd like to pass on to Josh for the preventive measures.
Thank you, Quan. Now I'll continue the presentation to talk about what the government responds to the finding of the Committee of Inquiry or COE regarding the Little India riot. There are three measures that the government has taken. First one is the ensuring a faster response. Second, detecting an incident of public disorder more quickly. And the last one, preventing similar incidents from happening. Now let's take a look at the first measure, faster response. The Arid Special Operation Command or SOC has been beefed up. There will be an additional 300 officers, doubling the current strength of the frontline officer. This means that there will be an additional type control troops from 8 to 12, and then at the same time, there will be a 3 instead of 2 police tactical troops on the round-the-clock standby. The additional officer will be configured for more rapid deployment on a lighter and more mobile platform. And then they also increase the number of officers in each troop from 35 to 44. And not forget, they also have an additional equipment for officers that will improve their sense making and operational capabilities. Hence, with this, the officer can deal better with the wider range of situation and crowd size. And going now, there are one of the observation of the COE's report was the approval proposed to activating the SOC has delayed their arrival time. Hence, because the SOC was delayed to arrive, it will have emboldened the writers. So now the amount of red tape needed to activate the writers, the SOC troops has been cut down. At first, only the Director of Operation of Police could activate the SOC troops. There are two key reasons why for this procedure. First, because the SOC is a high security move, and the assessment should be done only by high-ranking officers. The second one is because the Director of Operation is being placed to assess the overall national needs and priorities when there's competing demands. Now, after the riot, the division commander can also activate the SOC troops, but however, they still need to alert the police headquarters at the same time. We believe that this will make the troops to arrive in a shorter period of time. And then, the Singapore Civil Defence Force will also continue to have a joint exercise with the home team agencies so that they can integrate their procedures and enhancing their capabilities in order to ensure a smooth operation on the ground. Now, let's take a look at the second measure the government has taken in order to make a faster detection of the incident. They will have a new combined operation room. They will be equipped with tools to track the deployment of the police resources. And then they also have a dashboard and information management system to provide a better assessment on the situation on the ground. Moreover, there will be also the frontline officer will also equipped with a more advanced communication, imaging, and mobile computing technology, so that they can provide an early indication and gather valuable information. This will help the on-scene commander so that he can have a better picture about the situation on the ground, and that will help him to have a better decision making for the incident. Now I will pass my time to Misha.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Josh. Finally, one major area of focus is the preventing of similar incidents from happening. There are several ways that we can do this. Firstly, by enhancing the security in Little India. Secondly, stricter sales and consumption of alcohol. And lastly, improving infrastructure and public safety in Little India. So now let us look at what the government did to enhance the security. After the riot, the number of CCTVs increased by more than double, from 113 to 250, with another 88 CCTVs to be installed progressively. In addition, additional lightings are installed in 44 locations in Little India. All these installations will help to provide greater deterrence to provide greater deterrence to crime and public disorder. Next, police presence will also strengthen with 20 to 30 more police being deployed every weekend, in addition with a dedicated SOC troop. With all this, patrols and enforcement checks were conducted more frequently to maintain law and order in this area. Moving on to the restrictions of sales and public consumption of alcohol. Before the riot, there wasn't many restrictions, right? However, after the riot, more restriction was imposed by the Liquor Control Act, such as the banning of public consumption island-wide from 10:30 p.m. to 7 a.m. In addition, additional restrictions were imposed in this liquor control zone within Little India and Geylang. This where consumption of alcohol was banned during every weekend. Yeah, so all these restrictions will help to curb. All these restrictions will help to curb public drinking, which will in turn minimize the public disorder in Little India. So to improve infrastructure and public safety, firstly, 10-meter strip of rail along Hampsville Road was converted to a passenger waiting area for bus services. Secondly, Lembu Road was closed to vehicle every Sunday from noon to midnight. Thirdly, Campbell Road was fully pedestrianized. And lastly, 2 new traffic lights were installed along Serangoon Road. All these implementations will help to manage the flow of pedestrian and traffic, which will hence enhance the public safety in Little India. Last but not least, the government also aimed to improve the infrastructure of the dormitories of the foreign workers by housing them in a self-contained accommodation. These self-contained accommodation include facilities such as mini-mart, Wi-Fi, and bank, so that this will reduce their need to travel far for all these basic services. So what are the response mode that the government acquired? So during the crisis, the government acquired the avoiding method, which was discussed by Songwen earlier. Throughout this crisis, the government has adopted the accommodating method, as they are able to reassess the concerns of the member of public, and thus by using accommodating method, they are able to build up the trust that the member of public used to have with them. And lastly, I would suggest that the government applies the collaborating method, such as organizing events or activities to bridge the gap that exists between the citizen and foreigners, so that they will minimize any cultural difference that will create another riot. So yeah, with this, I will pass it on to Chen Chen to conclude on this presentation.
Hello everyone, I'll be concluding the next 4 minutes, as well as talk about how to manage crisis if it happens in workplaces. Firstly, since our group is talking on crisis management, I would like to emphasize the 3 normal attributes of crisis. It is a threat, it has elements of surprise, and it requires short decision time. Let's take Little India riot as an instance. Firstly, it is a threat to general public, and it has indeed caused the property damages and injuries. And secondly, it comes without expectation. It was sparked by the death of a drunk Indian driver, which was an accident. And thirdly, it was urgent, and immediate decisions had to be made. And besides, someone also pointed out that crisis is another form of change. So this defines the 4 attributes of crisis, which is need for change. After Little India riot, the changes have been made in 3 aspects, as introduced by the 3rd and 4th speakers. Firstly, more advanced strategies were carried into execution. And in law aspects, restrictions on alcohol selling and consumptions were also come into practice, and improvements on infrastructures and securities are also parts of the changes. And what's more, our group thinks that Singapore government and its people should not take this purely as a law and other problems. It's not just a simple crime case of finding out the culprits, making out the sentences, so that the punished would not dare do it again. We think Singapore government is called to care more on the foreign laborers that working in Singapore to gain them more social presence and to have them build trust on the Singapore government, and so that both sides can stay in harmony. But this will definitely increase the interactions between Singaporeans and foreign workers. So we may classify it into accommodating mode or cooperating mode to settle the crisis. And next, I'm going to talk about how we can manage crisis in workplace, which is more relevant to us after graduation. And here, the crisis only refers to the general crisis. As the saying goes, prevention is always better than cure. So fostering close ties with colleagues is always an effective way in preventing crisis from happening. By maintaining a good relationship with each other, the conflicts or problems will not go into crisis, and we can adopt the 5 methods we learned in lectures to settle down the conflicts. And since crisis happens without expectation, to have a corresponding plan in hand is vital. So that during crisis you can have procedure to follow, and this was generally prepared by the security division of the company, and it's always good for us to read it just for in case. And during crisis, always remember the first principle during any emergency is to keep calm and do not act in haste, and make sure you understand all the situations before you make any decisions. And what we can learn from either India or is that clear communication is also of much significance. So make sure there is no communication breakdown along the way, which may hinder you from dealing with the crisis. And also remember to prevent the dispersion of rumors, because actually in chaos, some people do not see things themselves, they just hear from other people. So rumoring around will only worsen the situation, and we should also show respect to the facts. And last but not least, be more sensitive to victims and the perpetrators. During crisis, to minimize loss, it's always suggested to keep far from the crowds. Okay, I think that's all for our group's presentations. Thank you, and let's move on to Q&A sessions. Any questions?
So what's your opinion on how the Singapore government handled the riot at the initial stage when it first started?
I feel that actually what they done was pretty good already, because they made very quick response to the accident itself. So they set their priorities very well by extricating the victim, which is the victim which died at that scene. So they tried to extricate him out of the scene and then handle it as a whole by having the associate activated. But due to some communication breakdown and the long procedure, it's actually let the government actually think back on what's the procedure so that they can improve on. But overall, it's a good approach.
So there was a delay in removing the body.
Delay?
Also, actually, there wasn't a delay. It's just that because at 9:45 p.m., I mentioned they removed the body. The method they removed was also quite smart by his commanding officer, the regular commanding officer, as SDF officer. Then after that, then they decided to remove to protect the timekeeper and the driver, because they also being thrown projectiles. So the only delay that happened during the whole situation is when the SOC, Special Operations Command, which specialized in handling riots, came. So overall, I think that's the only factor that sort of slowed down the whole process. Yeah.
forces was outnumbered initially, and they wanted to wait for the SOC arrival. Because SOC is a specialized force that will handle this riot. So the police on site is actually not specialized in handling them. And they were told not to arrest so that it will bring down the tension between the rioters and the police force. So that's why they did not actually arrest them at first. That's their main purpose.
So were there many people who were injured? Were there many rioters who were injured during the incident?
So during the process, around 45 officers were actually injured. Yeah, it's the officers, not the rioters, because they didn't do anything to the rioters. They just caused them, they just form a layer, like what you saw in the.
So how did they get injured? What was the reason behind it?
It's my slide, so it's because of the heroism. So they feel very heroic to clash with public authorities like officers. That's why
Also
they
because
started.
the rioters attacked.
Yeah, culture, yeah. It's part of the.
We also realized that they only target like the ambulance and the police
Yeah.
car, but not any other properties around them, because they feel that they only want to focus on such authorities itself.
Do you think one of the reasons why there is a riot is because there's some pent up frustration among the rioters? Perhaps they felt that they haven't been very well treated in Singapore as foreign laborers. Maybe they were looked down on. So this could be their opportunity to actually vent their frustration or their pent up anger towards it.
I think there is a misinterpretation between the rioters and the public or the police, because they think their first reaction is of the reality is why you extract the bodies, not arresting the driver and the timekeeper. So I think and I think they think they were looked down in this society, so they must fight for themselves.
So in other words, you do agree that maybe there is some pent up unhappiness in the population. One of the reasons why the riot exists.
To add on, it's only at the point of time that they have this emotion that they pan up. But because due to there's a survey that is being done, like all the foreigners that is working in Singapore, they actually felt that they are quite happy living in Singapore, living and working in Singapore itself. So I believe it's only at that moment of situation where they have this emotion that pan up.
But we also know that surveys may not be completely accurate, right? Because they're self-reports. And there could be many reasons why people report one way over the other. Moreover, these are they are considered foreign workers, so they may be quite reluctant to share even their true feelings because they are afraid that they might be found out or they might be repatriated. So do you think the survey is an accurate reflection of their feelings about living in Singapore?
So this may not be true. So I believe that the government, that's why I suggest that the government should set up a collaborating methods where which government should organize events at the Philippines to bring the citizen and foreigners together to bridge their difference, so that they will know so that there will be no cultural difference and misunderstanding between one another. So this will decrease any riots or quarrels among them. And the government also aim to build those self-contained accommodation which will include facilities for them, so that they will be satisfied just around their dormitory. They will